Sometimes an individual game or perhaps an entire series becomes such a cornerstone of an entire genre that they become something of a staple. This couldn't be more true for something like The Legend of Zelda. Time and again we have seen games try and emulate the formula that has led to the success that is the Zelda series. And today I'm going to be talking to you about one of the games that somehow follows in the footsteps of The Legend of Zelda without being a direct copycat. Today I'm going to talk to you about the Swords of Ditto, Mormo's Curse. What makes the Swords of Ditto a Zelda-like game is that we do at the core have to go through certain dungeons and collect a key item, and then at a later point go through a separate dungeon and use that item to solve specific puzzles that can only be solved with that item. One of the first things that I found that makes this different from Zelda is that these dungeons are kept separate. Now, one of the things that defines the Sword of Ditto as its own entity is this simple but refined art style. I definitely enjoyed this art style, and it reminded me a lot of Gravity Falls in a small way because the enemies found here would certainly fit in both settings. Any largely important NPC would definitely have a wildly different design and would immediately catch attention. Meanwhile, our standard NPCs, such as Everyday Villager, still have a simple but somewhat interesting art style, so that way they don't just fade into the background. And while the art style will grab your eye, the personality of this game will hold your attention for a lot longer because the dialogue is something that will catch you off guard more than once while you play the game. It is sharp and witty, and it had me laughing throughout each of my playthroughs as I hunted down what I call the true ending. While we get most of the flair of the game from Mormo and Puku taking verbal jabs at one another, that doesn't mean that the other NPCs don't have a lot to say either. So if you take the time to talk to everyone, you're more than likely going to be rewarded for it. Now, there is something that I found rather interesting about this, and that there is a few different ways you could play the game. You can either play this game once, go through the dungeons to get your Toys of Legend and complete your trials, then defeat Mormo and call it a day, and that's fine. You might find that the game is a bit too short if you do it that way, but it's totally an option. On top of that, you can do it that way and keep fighting Mormo over and over and over again at the end of each playthrough, taking on the extra challenges she throws your way with each successive playthrough in stride. These can be anything from an invulnerable in-game nemesis that will follow you around, or an in-game time limit such as 5 days. You could deal with these or any other number of challenges and face Mormo in a never-ending cycle as many times as you'd like. Or, if you're like me, you want the whole story, you can go with option 2 and go for the true ending. You see, after your first victory against Mormo and you start your second play, you start the game with something called an icon in your inventory. You can use this icon in the right area, and you'll have to fight special enemies and defeat them before a timer runs out. If you do this, you complete a ritual. Complete this ritual 5 times over the course of separate playthroughs, might I add, and you defeat Mormo one last time, and you get one more special boss fight at the end. If you win that boss fight, you get the true ending. And let me tell you this, it was absolutely worth the 25 plus hours I put into the game for that short and sweet special ending. Now, the Sword of Ditto, Mormo's Curse, is something of a collectathon to end collectathons. There are all kinds of items that you can use in this game, but there are 2 major forms of currency: money and celestial shards. Regular money is pretty self-explanatory. You can break some jars, cut some grass, kill some enemies, just the normal stuff, and you get some cold hard cash. Celestial shards, however, you can get from killing enemies, opening chests, a few other things as well. There are a few ways to get them. Both of these can actually be spent in designated shops. Cash can be spent in town on just about anything that is pretty mundane, whether it's a food item or on upgrades to your standard equipment, whereas the celestial shards can be spent on some more specialty items, more specifically at a shrine. You might be wondering, a shrine to whom? A shrine to Serendipity, a whale goddess There are a lot of other things you can spend it on, but this is the most important thing. You see, depending on the difficulty setting, there is permadeath in this game, and if you manage to find Serendipity's shrine and activate it, you can purchase effectively a 1-up from her using these celestial shards. However, you can only carry one of them on you at a time. So buyer beware and make sure that you have one on you. If you're going into Mormo's Tower, if you're playing on any difficulty, or if you're playing on the hardest difficulty, make sure you have one at all. The next thing that I want to talk about before I go into the pros and cons are badges and buffs. Now, you can collect badges as you go through this game, and they only really seem to come up as you start your next playthrough. Now, what do the badges really do? They can change the look of your avatar while also providing flat bonuses to specific stats depending on which badge you picked. Throughout your playthrough as that badge, you will kill enemies and level up that badge to increase the bonuses you'll get as you continue to use that badge, even on subsequent playthroughs. Also, starting with your very first playthrough, you can equip yourself with stickers, which act similarly to the badges from the original Paper Mario games, where they increase your abilities depending on which stickers you have equipped. As you level up your sword, which is your basic character level, you also can equip more stickers. Super useful. And finally, let's do the pro and con breakdown. Pro number 1 is absolutely that strategy is key. I love a good Zelda-like combat puzzle game. This had plenty of great puzzles that made me think, and while 1 or 2 did get repeated in my 6 playthroughs to get the true ending, I think that it's forgivable because I had done so many different ones. I still had to stop and remember what the solution was. Not to mention there were new problems thanks to the higher difficulty of my later playthroughs. You cannot just hack and slash your way through every room of this game. Just a few of them. Pro number 2 is ignore or immerse. This game has a ton of background information that is super interesting, and you absolutely need to dig around and look for it. And even if you find it, it's easy to just press A a little bit too fast and not be able to read that extra text. But if you take your time and get lost in the information, there is a lot of extra world building that can really help you get into the setting here. But if you'd rather just have fun dealing with monsters and traps and puzzles, then the game still fully functions on its own without any of this backup lore. Dialogue and dungeons still give you enough that you will not be lost, and you still have a good time playing this game. Next, we have to talk about music, because I swear if a game has good music, I have to talk about it. And it's because it is such a key part of the gaming experience, and Swords of Ditto does an amazing job with it. My personal favorite track is when you're ascending Mormo's palace, because it really helps set the mood for the confrontation, and all the music in this game absolutely shines. Our final pro is random factor number 1. The overworld map is randomly generated every single time you start a new playthrough, and while key locations like your house, Mormohenge, and the town are always present, where they are on the map will always be different. Also, what they may look like, specifically things like the town, will always look different, as will the location of all of your plot-specific dungeons. This can make each individual playthrough different in very interesting ways. Now, con number 1 is random factor number 2. Toys of Legend, which is basically your special equipment, are necessary to complete the trials and go on with your story. However, which toys you get and the puzzles you have to complete as a result can change with each playthrough. However, in 5 out of the 6 runs of the game that I did, I was unfortunate enough to get one toy I found to be the least interesting, the vinyl frisbee, which is effectively just a throwing disc. Nothing really bad about it. I was just hoping for something else on several of the playthroughs so that way I could see what else the game had to offer, and that's why this goes into the negative categories for me. Con number 2 is redundancy. I'm only marking this as a con because I played the game 6 times in a week, so don't think of this too harshly. But playing a lot of the same dungeon rooms, even in different orders or with stronger enemies, would start to feel a bit dry after a few tries. That said, I only wanted to include this here to say this is still worth doing. Only make sure that you do so at a more leisurely pace so you don't start to feel any burnout over seeing a lot of the same rooms too close together. According to how long to beat, the normal story takes an average of 7 hours to finish, but it can be done much faster. My final playthrough with the hidden boss only took me 2.5. This game can be bought both on Nintendo Switch and Steam for $14.99, and there's more than enough to do in the game, in my mind, to justify that price. I wholeheartedly believe that the Swords of Ditto Mormo's Curse has earned an 8.5 out of 10. Thank you all so much for stopping by and sharing your valuable time here with me. I really appreciate it. Please feel free to share this video out, like it, subscribe, comment down below. I would love to chat with you all, but that is all for today. I hope that you're having a fantastic, amazing, wonderful day, because you are fantastic, amazing, wonderful people. I love each and every single one of you, and I will talk to you all again soon. See ya.